Thank you so much for that introduction, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone. I'm Paroma. I'm one of the co-founders here at Snorkel AI. Couldn't be more excited to be with you today. I am really looking forward to this fireside chat on the critical role of data development for large language models and the role various techniques like prompt engineering, RAG, and fine-tuning play in this world. As we go along, please be sure to post your questions for us in the Zoom Q&A, and also tune into the live Q&A panel where we will be answering some of your questions as well. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Ali Arsenjani with us today. He's the director for AI and ML partner engineering over at Google. Google's kind of set the foundations for all the work that's happening with LLMs today, and Snorkel's incredibly proud to be a Google partner, and we appreciate all the support that we've had, during our partnership and even before, back in the research days. One fun fact about Dr. Arsenjani is that he's a Rumi scholar and a published poet, so fascinated by that and can't wait to dig into it after our conversation. So thank you so much for spending the time with us, and welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much, Paroma. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and just basically talk about our partnership with Snorkel and how we deliver value to our mutual customers. It's just very exciting to talk about these things, especially in these times where things are crackling with energy in the air with generative AI, and people are trying to figure things out. So I'm really glad you're doing this.
Wonderful. And you said it exactly right. Things are crackling with energy right now around the world of generative AI. We've sort of seen a cycle in just the past few months where people went from thinking, generative AI will solve anything and everything to actually trying it out, trying to see how to put it into production, and realizing that it's not actually a one click to solve all problems, right? There has to be some work, some customization that happens for these large language models before they can be used for use cases. And this is especially true in the enterprise, something you're very familiar with and have seen before. Would love to get your thoughts on kind of the forms that this customization has taken and what you've seen.
Absolutely. So I can recognize the fact that every enterprise considers their data to be their secret sauce. And they painstakingly gather information, whether it's from their own systems or systems that are related to what they do. And it is their intellectual capital and assets. And very often these large language models are not privy to the special domains, those industry subsectors that our mutual customers, for example, are focused on. Let's say financial services. And so infusing that data into the expertise that these large language models provide is absolutely essential to providing competitive advantage to these companies. Because without that secret sauce that every company has, they kind of lose their competitive edge when they get to large language models, because it does not reflect their specialized domain-specific knowledge. So the idea is to infuse that knowledge with the data. And I know Snorkel does a lot to prepare that data so that models can be trained leveraging your data.
And that's exactly right. I think we've always had this belief that data is truly at the center of the AI development process. And like you said, I think it's never been truer than today when you have these models with millions of parameters that are difficult to tweak. So the main lever folks have, the main competitive advantage, as you put it, these enterprises have, is really infusing their domain expertise, their knowledge into these models via the data that's kind of unique to every company and every organization. One of the things that's kind of very associated with the data is this idea of domain expertise. With large language models, they're more general and they've been trained on a lot of data that's out there. Have you seen people be interested in kind of making these large language models a little bit more niche, learn very specific factors, and where's that been popular, and how have people gone about addressing that?
Yeah, excellent point. I see a lot of interest in taking that domain-specific knowledge and creating domain-specific models out of that. Basically, in some shape or form, fine-tuning these foundation models, whether it's using adapter tuning or, for example, low-rank adaptation, some form of parameter-efficient fine-tuning is very popular because you don't really have to build an entire model and maintain that model out of it. You can have a very lightweight model and still infuse the jargon, the ontology, the knowledge graphs, the
Right.
data that is very unique to your subsector,
Yeah.
and right, and infuse that in the language model in the way that you can query it and you can get results that are super relevant to your domain. That's a direction that people are taking. It's a very positive direction. I'm going to also balance that out with some misconceptions that are out there because this area is so nascent.
Yeah.
People generally think this is kind of like, as I look across the board, that they have to have their own fine-tuned models, completely fine-tuned. What I'm not sure everybody realizes is that fully fine-tuning these models can be relatively expensive.
Right.
And the deployment of these models, if they end up being large models, is not very cheap either. But if you do a form of parameter efficient fine-tuning, and you can fail fast, you can find the domain initially in which this works well. And then if you do want to fine-tune a model, fully fine-tune it later, once you're clear on exactly what the value proposition is, then you can do that.
Yeah.
And then the second misconception is this notion, I'll call it the Lord of the Rings kind of misperception. It's because it's like one model will rule them all. So people come to us and say, when are you going to come out with your latest model, whatever the
Right.
model of the day, right, happens to be? And we're more like, these models are improving constantly, being
Yeah.
trained, like every few months. So, and by the way, for specific domains, one model will typically
Yeah.
not rule them all. It's going
Right.
to be a
Right.
number of smaller models, right,
Yeah.
that are very specific for domains. Even within one company, you will have different sectors or subsectors. And think of financial services. You have
Yeah.
banking, you have financial markets, you have
Right.
consumer lending, right? So these are niche areas, like you were saying, Paroma. They are niche areas.
Yeah.
For each of these niche areas, yeah, you can, tune a large model on that. But when you want to have specialized dialogue with them,
Yeah.
it might be a good idea to test the parameter efficient fine tuning for that subsector, just for consumer lending, for example, or just for financial service, financial markets, or just regular banking,
Yeah.
for example, right? And you can derive a whole lot of value just from that.
I think that's exactly something that we're very aligned on. That trade-off between balancing. Yes, we want the largest model, but sometimes there's kind of cost and infrastructure things associated with that. And you have these specialized models, even within one area like financial services. There's kind of a specific set of models you need for each unique task that you want to do, and it's really these smaller specialized models that we also think are going to be the future of where LLMs take us and how they'll be productionized in the enterprise. This reminds me, actually, there's a lot of techniques that are out there for folks to work with LLMs, prompting, RAG, fine tuning, like we were just talking about. How would you recommend practitioners think about the differences between these and which ones they should be using and when?
Right. I actually have a couple of pictures I want to show. Pictures worth 1,000 words. If I can project these pictures, I think might be helpful. So here, basically, what I'm seeing is you have these different patterns almost that you need to implement as you take the journey for generative AI.
Mhm.
So you don't necessarily have to implement all of them at once, but this is kind of the superset. So you typically want to prompt models. You want to do some in-context learning with a few shot examples. You might try additional techniques like chain of thought, etc. But these are all within the realm of prompt engineering. And then on the side of serving, you can basically serve different models, right? You can serve foundation models, the tuned models, the customized models, etc. So you could get away with just doing prompting and serving these models immediately. But there's a lot more things that are involved as you move towards more and more sophistication in this world. I'm actually going to show this first, because if you look at this, you know, almost different levels of maturity or sophistication or requirements. The first one is just prompt and serve, and you go to bard.google.com, you enter in something, and you get a response back. That's it. Or you go to, for example, Vertex AI for a secure, enterprise production grade environment, and you ask a question, and I don't know, the PaLM 2 model gives you a response. Great, you're done. Now, the next step is you want to provide contextual information. So the model was trained at some point in the past. You're in, let's say you're in San Francisco today, and you want to plan a bike ride, and but the model doesn't know where you're at or what the weather is looking like. Maybe it's a bad idea because it's raining. So you want to give the model a little bit more context. Where are you? What the weather looks like? What your preferences are? Do you want to go steep hills bike riding, or just normal, road bike riding? And so this retrieval augmented generation, for you to actually retrieve additional information, or RAG, as we refer to it these days, might be super relevant, because you extract content, you go to the APIs, you get information about the weather, about the location, about your preferences. Now you provide the contextual information along with the prompt to the model, and now the model can make more sense. It'll be like, okay, I know I'm not going to hallucinate now. I'm going to hallucinate less, and I'm going to give something that's great. But the third level could be, okay, great, I got the context, but let's say, just to give you an analogy, if you were, let's say you were not a physician, right? And you were going to be asked to see someone for a particular set of symptoms. You're like, why me? I'm not a physician. So they'll say, no problem. Here, take all these textbooks, read them over the weekend, and you're now suddenly a physician. You're like, what are you talking about? That's impossible. So even if you do RAG, if you do retrieval augmented generation, I read all those books, I'm still not a physician. So you actually have to tune these models. So the analogy here would be, if I only know a certain amount of things, I actually have to go to medical school, and I have to be trained to become a physician. So you can tune your model. You can essentially customize your model and train that model in order to know that new domain. And understand how to produce specific output. So that's kind of level 3. You're using RAG, but you're also tuning models for special purposes. Level 4 is where you're like, you've done that, you get a response back, you're not quite sure whether this response is real, right? It may be hallucinating. So you want to ground the response with factual grounding. So you want to go out and do some kind of a search, whether it's internal documents within your organization or out there on the internet, and bring back citations of, okay, I gave you this answer. This is the language model saying this. I gave you this answer, but here are references. So you can click on the references and see if this is true. And then, of course, levels 5 and 6 are just more sophisticated, with actually controlling the LLM in various ways, providing, reasoning and acting and planning and doing LLM ops. So I won't go into that very specifically, but basically what you can do is, this diagram represents all of what we just discussed, the superset, the whole 9 yards. And but you don't have to implement, as I mentioned, all of these at once, but you do have to consider, as you're going through this journey, there's the prompting, there's the RAG, there's the tuning, there's the adapt and serving, there's the grounding. And of course, you want your responses to be responsible. You want to check for biases, safety attributes, and you want to be in a secure environment to begin with. So
Right.
those are very valid things that you can take a look at. And if people want to know more about that, they can take a picture of this and read a blog about it. But that's pretty much the pictures I have to show today.
And like you said, a picture paints 1,000 words, and the visual sort of framework that you provided really drives home the point that there's no one silver bullet, right? It's truly a combination of various techniques that appear at different parts of the LLM development and customization pipeline that bring it to a level where it's production ready, where it's something that you trust, where it's something that's aligned and customized to the data and the domain expertise that you have. And I think, this really leads us well into another topic that we wanted to touch on, which was, as we know, these models don't work outright out of the box with one click. There's a lot that goes into making these possible. How do you see our joint customers benefiting from the partnership that Google has with Snorkel AI, especially in this landscape that you provided?
Great point. That's a topic I love talking about because it's the better together story. It's how our companies working together can better serve our customers. So Snorkel has, and you know this better than anyone, right? You're managing the whole set of products that you have, and basically you provide expertise at specific areas of the life cycle. Of course, you can do the whole thing, but you provide huge amounts of value add. For example, in preparing the data for machine learning training, in labeling the data, in understanding whether there are biases in the data, whether the distribution of data can affect something in the future. So that section of the life cycle where 80% of data science is just preparing the data properly and validating that, Snorkel provides immense capabilities in that area. And then you can go ahead and tune on Vertex AI and deploy on Vertex AI and grounded and perform RAG and all those other things. So those are some areas that I think in combination, customers can use us together, our companies, to augment the ML lifecycle with things that we all bring to bear with specific expertise at each stage in order to prepare data better and position them for these domain-specific models, for retrieval augmentation, for grounding, and that sort of a thing.
Thank you so much. And it's always wonderful to hear your perspective on, exactly where Snorkel plays a role. And like you described, I think Wayfair, one of our joint customers, has really been able to take advantage of this amazing partnership, even on the technology front, and see exactly how developing their data helped them see significant gains with their model that they've put into production. And I know we have a blog on our website if folks are interested in learning more. One maybe last question for us to get into, and it'll be a fun one, is one thing that you're excited about with the advent of large language models, and maybe one thing that you're not so excited about or a little bit worried about.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, the thing that I'm a little bit worried about is that the whole game of generative AI is going to be similar to almost what the situation is with antivirus software. So it's like, if a person uses large language models, they can gain huge productivity. But if they're doing good stuff, that productivity is going to be good productivity.
Right.
If some bad actor utilizes, large language models, etc., it's going to create more productivity for them, which is not necessarily good for mankind.
Right.
So that's what worries me. And so our companies putting in more guardrails, more safety factors, more checks and balances. For example, when you send an LLM a message with Google, you get a bunch of safety attributes. You can threshold on them to see, is this something that I want to actually show to my customers?
Right.
We have a content moderation API, which allows you to vet whether, some input is toxic or not.
Mhm.
So these are, or doing grounding, doing factual grounding. These all help, but at the end of the day, it really is the entire community. We all
Right.
need to come together, and legislation ultimately
Mhm.
that needs to be put in place so that it decreases the ability of bad actors to use language models. But I'm very excited at the same time, because if you put this in good hands, so to
Right.
speak, we're all going to be more productive, and we can do more, better, faster, and lead more productive lives. And at
Mhm.
the same time, find more time for ourselves, maybe,
Right.
and our families and our loved ones and friends, and do things that are not just, our day job, but do
Yeah.
other things that contribute to humanity.
I really like that perspective and couldn't agree more. I think having AI being used responsibly is something that everyone should be very, very aware of and care about and contribute to making sure it happens that way. And the productivity gains, the good productivity gains, like you said, so excited to see what happens. I think a lot of folks have found very interesting ways of using these large language models in their daily lives to improve various workflows, in our day jobs, but also, outside of work for their hobbies and other interests. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see what we see both on the work and more creative side of the world with large language models. Thank you again, Dr. Arsenjani, for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. Kind of three takeaways, if I had to mention, were, we talked about how these large language models really work out of the box, especially for enterprise applications. It's really important to inject data, which, like you said, is the secret sauce for enterprises and organizations, to inject their expertise and their unique data into these models and make them work for their use cases of interest. With your visuals, we really saw how there's no one silver bullet to making sure that these large language models work for the use cases at hand. The success really depends on knowing, what combination of techniques to use, how much you need to customize your model, when to use, RAG versus prompting versus fine tuning, and which one is important for which use cases. And there's really an art to it. And like you said, that's something that we've been working together on, and Snorkel's been super excited about. And then the last one I really liked was your idea around, there's no one model that's going to rule them all. There will be these specialized models, not just for various verticals like finance, but even within the verticals that will have to be kind of fine-tuned for the specific task that they want to do. They will have to be fed the data that's specific to that organization and that specific use case. So again, really, really enjoyed the chat. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your very wonderful visuals on this topic that really drove home these points that we're talking about.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate it.